Okay, welcome back. We're doing Appendix A today. If you recall from our previous discussion in the introduction videos, Appendix A is not technically in the book. It's a separate PDF file, which we made available to you. So you can download this guy, and then we'll start. So, what are the learning objectives? So, on page 3 of the PDF, it talks about creating databases and creating tables and the different data types that Microsoft Access uses. You know, some things are numbers and some things are text, that kind of stuff. We're going to learn how to insert data, and we're going to create some relationships, and this is also where you can write queries, although writing queries is actually something for the next chapter. So the introduction on page 4, talk about, Microsoft Access is basically a personal database. It's not designed to have, a corporate environment with, hundreds of users hitting it. It's designed for you to be on your machine, and maybe if you put it on a network share, you could have a dozen or so people running it. It does combine an awful lot of features together. It combines the DBMS with this application generator thing that can produce forms, it can produce reports, it could do graphical kind of queries. We're not going to be doing that. But it's got some really cool stuff to it. Okay, one of the first things that pops up that's kind of memorable in the text is this thing here. This is a way to describe a table using text. So they call it schema format, although later it gets changed its name. But I call this text-based relational notation. Okay, so you're going to have to learn text-based relational notation. So this is the student, class, and grade thing we had from last time. We have the student number, last name, first name, and email address. That's exactly what this is. So this is describing those tables. It's describing the name of the table, and then parentheses, and then the column names. And if a column is a primary key, it gets underlined. So the class has a primary key, and grades have both primary keys and foreign keys, both. So italics means it's a foreign key, and it can be both at the same time, okay? This is a compound primary key. It takes 2 to tango. Okay, good. Okay, so one more time. What's the purpose for a foreign key? Well, the purpose for the foreign key, is to glue these things together. I need some way to connect the student table to the grade table. And I have some way of connecting the class table to the grade table. I have to have some connection. Typically what it is some column over here attaches to some column over there. And some column over here is equivalent to some column over here. By the way, the column names do not have to be the same in order for this to work. Although most people, just to maintain your sanity, you do make the column names the same. So it is student number here and student number there. I mean, technically there's no need to have them called that, but if you want to keep your hair, please always call them the same thing. Okay, so some terms on page 5, and Microsoft Access uses some terms slightly different, so I'm going to tell you what their terms are, and then I'm going to change them. So a table key. All right, that's a primary key. I'm sorry. I'm not going to ever call it a table key. It uniquely identifies a row. So it's fairly obvious to me that student number uniquely identifies this row because there's no duplicates. I mean, there's no ambiguity whatsoever. If I said student number 1, clearly you know which one I'm talking about. Likewise here, if I said class number 10, clearly no problem. But if I go down to here and say student number 1, are you sure which row I'm talking about? No, because there's 2 of them. Okay? All right, good. So a table key uniquely identifies a single row. Okay. So I'm going to do a demo here. So we're going to build this database that you see on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this guy up. Either I have it pinned to my start menu, but perhaps you don't. And then we start up. I'm going to pick a blank database because that's pretty good to me. And then I'm going to call this guy, just to be consistent with what the book is calling it. First of all, notice the file extension, ACCDB. I'm going to call this guy student class grade. Okay? Student class grade. That's kind of a mouthful. Now, I'm going to immediately just kind of close this guy off because that's not what we're after. So let's just take a look at the view here. This is called the ribbon. And when you click through these tabs, the ribbon changes. If I go to create, I get a whole new set of ribbon stuff, external data and database tools and help and all the rest of that. Home is where you obviously where you're going to be starting up. Okay, so this right here is the object view, and this is where when you create things, you create a query or you create a table. This is where they're all going to show, and it's kind of weird, but this is where the reports would go, the queries, the forms. Practically everything is considered an object. So don't get excited about the term that they're talking about here. All access objects. That's kind of weird, but anyway. So that left hand, I kind of look at it sort of like a navigation pane. Okay, so let's say I want to open an existing database that I have. That'd be pretty cool. It's just some file, and just like you'd expect, you'd have an open. So I'm going to hit Browse and go to my documents and pick this one from the author's website. So now what I've got is I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here in this Access Objects section. Lots and lots of stuff. By the way, whenever you copy stuff from a zip file or the internet, you get this little warning, and I'm gonna OK the content. So now I can see a bunch of tables in here. Okay, if you just double click on a table, it'll show its contents, which is kind of straightforward, right? Kind of sort of makes sense. Instead of going into Microsoft Access and then doing the file, just like you could do Microsoft Word or Excel, you could just double click on the file from the File Explorer, right? And it'll launch the application. Right, you don't need to be told that. You know all that stuff, right? Okay. So we need to be creating some tables for ours. So let me get back to our blank database. So I'm going to do a file, and I'm going to do open, and I'm going to browse, and I'm going to pick the guy that we started on, which is this guy. He doesn't have anything in him yet. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're back to nothing. So we need to be able to create 3 tables: a student table, a class table, and a grade table. So they show exactly what this thing is supposed to look like. They say, okay, here's what the student table should look like. It should have a column called student name, and then a data type. And we'll talk about data types in just a minute. And then whether or not it's a primary key and whether or not it's required. Okay, cool. Surrogate, remember the term surrogate? Because there's 3 different ways you can describe what I call an auto number. It could be called an auto number, it could be called a synthetic key, it could be called a surrogate key. It goes by lots of names. Later on, there's even a 4th one called an identity, but we're not there yet. Okay. So we're going to create this table. All right, so this is the student table. So I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to pick this thing called table design. It's a little easier interface, the one with the little plus sign. And so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say student number and the data type. So I'm going to go ahead and pick off the list, I'm going to pick auto number because that's what it said. And the other one was first name. And then this is where you can go in and look at it. It says it's text 25. Okay. So let's see what we have in here. Is there something called text? Well, there's something called short text. I guess that's good. But, okay. So here's the field size, okay? And they say that we want this thing to be 25. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go to the field size and tell it is 25. Then I'm going to go down here and say last name. And it's going to be short text 25. And then email. How did they say it? Yeah, email address. And it's going to be text 100. And short text, and then 100. Cool. All right, we've got all this filled in. So now I just want to save this guy. And so oddly enough, this is kind of weird. If I was to close this table, it's going to come up and say, hey, would you like to save it? And I go, yes. And then I'm going to call this student. Oh, by the way, I didn't actually, hang on, let me hit cancel here. I forgot to make one of these guys the primary key. So you click on this row here, and then do a right click, and it says primary key. Woohoo! I'm going to do that. So now I have a primary key. Now I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to call it student and hit return. So now I have a table. Doesn't have anything in it yet, but I have a table. Okay. Now this is actually pretty straightforward. So doing this procedure, you can't learn Microsoft Access by watching me. You have to basically do this yourself. So to cut time on the video, I'm going to go ahead and do the other column, other tables right now. Okay, just to cut some time. All right. Okay, so I've got my class number. It's a long, so I click here. Tell me a little bit about this guy. Got the class name, which is 25, the term, which is 12, the section, which is an integer. I've got my primary key. I'm going to go ahead and save this guy, and I'm going to call him class. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other table. Okay, so here is the table for the grades, where I have a student number, which is a plain old number, a class number, and then the grade. Now I made it the type is a double with decimal point is equal to 2. Now here I have to select 2 keys. So you might think this would be kind of easy to do like that. Just select 2 keys at once. I'm going to go ahead and save this guy. I'll call this one grade. Or is it grades plural? Huh. I don't suppose it matters. I'm going to call mine grade. Okay, so I've created these 3 tables. So once again, there's no data in them. So let's go back. So here's what the original one looked like. Here's the student table, and it gave you everything you needed to know. Then there was the one for the class name, and then the one that glues them all together. So here are the choices for data type. Short text, okay? Text is kind of short, it just means you're putting strings in there like Mary had a little lamb, or first name or last name. A number is some sort of number. It could be an integer, which means no decimal points, or it could be something a little bit more sophisticated where I could go in and say, I want a single precision floating point or a double precision floating point. Date and time, currency, that kind of makes sense. An auto number automatically creates the numbers for you. Kind of cool. This is called a Boolean, or a yes, no, or on, off, true, false, something like that. We're not going to be dealing with all the rest of this stuff. So those are the basic types that we should be using. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is to actually start filling in some of the data. So now when we go to here, I have to switch to what's called the data sheet view. Like here, so we're not actually designing anything now, right? So here's where I would actually start entering things. Now, I don't actually enter anything for the class number because that's an auto number, which means it'll do it for me. So this little asterisk right here basically means that this row is being worked on. So the class name, oh no, this one's not an auto number. So this is 10, and I'm not necessarily going to follow. So this is going to be, I don't know, CIS4301, and the term is summer 2022, and the section is 115. Okay, now if I use the tab key or I move past that, either one, using the cursor, while I'm writing this thing asterisk means new. So if I type 20 here, it changes to a little pencil. See the little pencil there? So the pencil means I'm in the middle of editing something. Kind of sort of makes sense, right? So asterisk means new line, asterisk, and then to get past this, I would have to go in and type, whatever it is, CIS, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't know, make it the summer 2022 and 115. And so I can use my cursor to move off the line, or I can use the tab key. So that's basically how you enter the data. I'm not going to enter all the data that's in here. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so you guys know how this works.